am Glaucia Rosas, co-founder and director at the edtech Alliance. In this series of interviews, I am talking with key figures on the international edtech scene to get their perspectives on how schools can really get themselves on track with their education technology.
Hi, everyone. Today, I am delighted to have here Chris Baldwin. Chris is the Enabling Technology Lead of the Nord Anglia Education Group and is responsible for the edtech applications ecosystems for over 70 schools around the world. So today, Chris will be sharing the best practice approaches that Nord Anglia takes to edtech and the lessons that they've learned since they started building their portfolio of schools. So hi, Chris. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello. It's lovely to be with you, Glaucia.
Thank you very much. So let's start with the first question. Chris, can you tell us a little about the portfolio of schools that Nord Anglia has constructed and your approach to edtech across the group?
Certainly, yes. Well, Nord Anglia now has over 80 schools and we're in over 30 countries worldwide. We cover a very, very wide range of geographies. So North America, Central America, South America, Europe, Middle East, India, Southeast Asia, China. So that ranges from developed countries to less developed countries. And there are obviously some tech challenges, jurisdictional challenges to handle around implementing edtech in these schools. We have around about 15,000 staff and about 75,000 students. We're quite a large organization. In terms of approach to edtech across the group, or technology more broadly, we have some group standards when it comes to things like HR, IT systems, finance systems, and that kind of thing, what you might call back office tools. Moving more towards the tech, or towards the edtech direction, so we have a standard MIS, Management Information System, for student data. But in terms of tech in the classroom, we don't have any standardized approaches. So more from the central level, it's a matter of guidance for the schools, providing them best practice, providing them help to implement. And we also have some recommended or suggested tools that they can use if they want some guidance in certain particular areas, particularly in the VLE area.
Wow. That's fantastic. So with all your visibility of such a large number of diverse schools, like kind of having their own systems sometimes in certain areas, are there any common best practice tips for getting the most out of the edtech that you can share with us?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. It's something to talk about for quite a long time. So one of the most important pieces is around stakeholder engagement. I often like to say it's really, really easy to deploy edtech. You can deploy a piece of edtech in any school in 5 minutes, and then no one will use it.
Yes.
So, of course, what on earth is the point of doing that? There's no point whatsoever. So we want to deploy edtech because at the end of the day, we want it to do good for the students. We want it to do good for the teachers and do good for the parents, as though thinking about those as three main stakeholder groups. And then also in terms of a group of schools, there's school management as another stakeholder. And then we've got regional management and then us sitting in the centre as well. So we've got various different disparate stakeholder groups. But teacher buy-in is the key. That really is the most important thing. You can have everyone else saying this is a great piece of tech. We really, really love what this thing will do. If the teachers don't want to use it, they won't use it. Education is very different to, you might say, something, where more compliance-based. If somebody's working in a bank, then the bank tells the staff what to do, they do it, and there's no question. But in the school, teachers, as we all know, teachers are artists. So there's the whole debate about is teaching an art or is teaching a science? Of course, it's a bit of both. But we want teachers to use their art in the school. We don't want to lay down any rules. I think that's the case universally. We don't want to say, don't do this. We want to allow the teachers the freedom and the flexibility to express their art and to be able to make use of technology that they think is right in their situation. But of course, there needs to be some guardrails around that. So thinking about things like safeguarding personally identifiable information that sometimes gets out into these tools. So guidance for the teachers in terms of what they use. And then if there is something that we want to, for various reasons, implement from the centre, then really getting their buy-in, getting teachers buy-in, and then professional development, teacher training, getting them to believe in the vision. and ideally even helping them to form the vision. That's something that really is key. So getting teachers involved within any new edtech project right from the very beginning, getting teachers' voice, obviously in large organizations. So say we have 15,000 staff in Nord Anglia, over 10,000 teachers. So we can't get every single teacher in a consultative process. That obviously just wouldn't work. But getting identifying key stakeholders, key teachers, people who are actually on the ground at the chalk face in the classrooms, getting them involved, and then surfacing their involvement when we meet with other schools. Maybe there are other schools that come on board the project later on. Then if they understand that we have actually gone through this process, then that really is key. So I work obviously in edtech. I've worked in edtech for a very long time. I have a teaching background as well. And I think that's very important, that they don't think that I'm somebody who's coming from corporate IT and saying, you must do this without any real understanding. So really empathizing with the teachers, having people in the central teams who know what it's like to be in the classroom is really key in order to building up that stakeholder engagement. So these are some of the things that I've found.
That is true. And we see this a lot. Lots of technology can be just quickly installed, but actually implemented, it's a different story. That's when you think about the vision, the buy-in, the stakeholders, all the process, the trainings, communication, and so on. So this is what you're saying is exactly what we see in schools, the difference between both.
Yeah. So I often like to think of the adoption cycle. So there's a very well-known adoption cycle with any technology that you introduce. So First of all, when you bring in a new piece of technology, people are very excited about it. So there are inflated expectations. And then when the reality hits in, then it starts to go down, and there's a trough of disillusionment, they call it. And then it starts to sort of even out and go up, and then you get into the kind of a more productive kind of environment. But you've got to go through that process, and it happens over and over again. And so you always have that trough of disillusionment when people think, oh, this is horrible. The VLE that I had before was much better. When I had more freedom, it was much better. But then when people get used to those new tools, they then start to explore them, realize that actually it's not so bad after all. And all this does this, and that they can now do. Plus the advantage when it's a central project, there are benefits of the group, benefits of scale. So obviously things like financial benefits, which teachers are going to be less interested in. But there are, for example, centralized training. That's another thing that you can do when you're implementing an edtech project at scale, at a group scale. We can provide lots of support that maybe if it was just an individual school doing it on their own, they wouldn't have that level of support. Things like data, being able to collect data together, and then enable the teachers with more insights from that data. That's the kind of thing that you can do when you have a larger scale project, than rather than just an individual school doing a thing on their own.
Yes, and since you touched data, this was my third question. So data integration and creating a single version of the truth across the schools seems to be a real struggle for most schools. So can you share how Nord Anglia is tackling this growing issue?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. It's something that we've been working with for many, many years at Nord Anglia and in previous roles as well. So I'm sure everybody in this space is familiar with the problem. So there's some solutions or some routes that we've taken to tackle these issues. So some years ago in Nord Anglia, prior to my being here, there was a project to standardize the MIS, Management Information System, Student Information System, some people refer to them as. And then a standard group student information system was implemented, but the schools had lots of flexibility in terms of how they actually implemented it. So we might say that it was good for the schools, but we didn't fully leverage having one group standard. So then we embarked on a program to then standardize the usage of our management information system, setting up standard operating procedures so that all of the schools knew what they were doing. They could follow those procedures, and things like taking registers and the modules of the tools that they were using. We can also track against standard operating procedures, SOPs. So you can set KPIs, key performance indicators, against standard operating procedures. And then that allows or helps the schools to become more standardized. But say with an MIS, it's a back-end system. Obviously, the teachers use it, so it's important. We want to get it good for the teachers, with such a large number of teachers. But it's less important in terms of actual classroom practice. So there's more scope for standardizing that kind of thing. But then standardizing the back-end data across all of those systems means that then you can start reporting on what you're doing and then really understanding, well, this school is doing well, this school is not doing so well. You can have comparative data to be able to understand. And of course, it's not just all about the data. It's not just the numbers. You need to then understand the situation in the schools. So it's not it can be a blunt instrument, but then at least having that, it allows you to start having conversations with the schools around, how you can then improve standards in schools. So that's kind of one approach to standardization to some extent, more for the back office tools. Also, so we use Microsoft for identity management. So the Azure Active Directory, the Microsoft 365 accounts for all staff and students. That again has been a journey. So think about the players in this space. Google, obviously another big player in this space. And then it's very easy to have, one identity in one tool, another identity in another tool, another identity in another tool. And that means having different usernames and passwords for all of these tools and no integrations. That then obviously creates security issues. It creates issues around the personal information that gets pushed into all of those tools. So we've been working very hard on unifying Microsoft as the identity management provider for our staff and students, so that they have one login into their Microsoft ecosystem, and then where possible, putting in single sign-on with Microsoft in the various pieces of edtech tools that I use.
Okay.
In addition, So in addition, as a large organization, we have capabilities around a tool called MuleSoft, which maybe it's quite well known in the higher education space. It's an industry standard tool, not just in edtech, but in IT in general. And that's a tool which allows you to build your own integrations, so to standardize APIs. So we have built out integrations between MuleSoft, between our management information system, using MuleSoft to then push the student data, various types of student data. So obviously, student and staff email, first name, last name, and then the sets and forms that they're in. And then we're able to push that data out into the other tools. So then we have one source of truth for that data. So we're obviously quite a large organization. So that's given us we have the capability to use tools like MuleSoft. There are also other tools in the market. So Wand is one example. SDS is another slightly different approach, School Data Sync. So there are commercially available tools that allow this sort of standardized integration, which can then allow there to be one version of the truth for the staff and student data. So that's the broad approach that we're taking to that. But it's a long journey. So there are no overnight solutions.
Yes, and I see that many schools are still in the phase of identifying the data that they have. Where do you keep it? Why do you keep it? How to connect them? It makes sense to connect them. How to connect the systems, as you mentioned, with the APIs that you develop. So I think this is a standard for a company, a big company like Nord Anglia, with great structure and great project management, have skills for a long time. But now I think even smaller schools are starting to realize the importance of data and how they need to connect it to make it more efficient. And not even efficiency in terms of the operations, but also efficiency for teaching and learning, for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. And data is incredibly powerful and it's incredibly valuable as well. And data often belongs to the companies, whereas there's an argument that it should belong, and I mean, not using the word belong in any legal sense of the word, obviously, but it should belong to maybe to the schools, maybe even to the students and the parents themselves. So that's something that we're exploring at the moment, which is a really interesting area to get into, kind of thinking about data ethics and who should have control of that data and how that does as students, they're young, so obviously the parents have more responsibility, and then as they get older, how they can take agency for their own data there as well. So that's really interesting.
Yes. I feel like from talking to many people, I feel like the technology wave in terms of software and maybe like teaching and learning technology really has passed. And now people are starting to realize that they need to focus on data as the new big thing for education technology. I'm getting this feeling from talking to people.
Absolutely, yeah. And another element that's related there, which I think is really important, is around standards, so industry standards. there are obviously a number of standards. So the like LTI as a standard. So the what used to be called IMS, and then now call themselves One edtech. So their suite of standards are important. There are the whole maybe the XAPI more used in corporate e-learning than in K-12 education, although I think it has a role. So I think it's important for schools and school groups to implement standards and also to insist with vendors that they use standards. Because if we as educational technology buyers insist that the vendors use those standards, then they'll build standards and we'll be able to create a much more integrated ecosystem that then does just have one version of the truth. And it also gives more flexibility, because if we built a system which uses these standards, if for whatever reason we need to swap out one vendor for another, maybe a company goes bust, or maybe a company gets taken over and their products are decommissioned, both of these things I've had experience of, then we're not stuck with a legacy solution or stuck with something that we can no longer use, with having to go for an emergency fix. But if they use standards, then it's relatively easy. Obviously, it's not easy, but it's relatively easy to then swap in another tool for the previous one that we no longer use.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you for sharing that. And sticking with data, another interesting topic to talk about is cybersecurity. So it is a big headache for the majority of the schools we talk to, and the attack rate only appears to be rising. So how is Nord Anglia protecting its schools and their communities, and what can you share with other schools about that?
Yeah, this is such an important topic. We are under constant attack every single day. Our head of cybersecurity has data on how many attacks we face. If there are any schools out there who say they're not being attacked, then they are, and that probably means that the hackers are already in your systems. It really is vital that people pay attention to this. So the approach that we are taking, it's a two-pronged approach, if you like. So partly it's education of end users. So this means staff, and it also means students. So we're providing training for our staff and our students on best practice. Obviously, for student training, that needs to be age appropriate as well. And also, so education is one end, and the other aspect is tooling and processes, or back-end processes. So we are making sure that we follow best practice in terms of our IT estate, that we have security, everything tied down. So for access controls, people only have access to things that they have the rights to access. The teachers have access to things in their school. At a regional level, the regions only have access to their region. So role-based access controls, we call that. And also security testing, penetration testing is really, really important. So pen testing, penetration testing, both in terms of the things that we develop ourselves in-house, but also insisting on that from vendors. Often I meet with edtech companies and I say to them, can you please share with me your latest pen test report? And it's surprising how many times they say, what's a pen test? They've never heard of this. Yeah. It really is shocking. And the situation has improved recently, but it's so important that as edtech buyers, we insist that the companies that we work with, the vendors that we work with, they test their software thoroughly. And also they share their pen test reports with us so that we can actually review and make sure that they are doing what they say that they're doing, and they're actually implementing any recommended fixes that their pen test has shown.
Yes, and what we see as well is there are many schools that use an example. They have Microsoft systems, but they don't use the full cybersecurity capabilities that they have built in, given to them. So it's really about exploring this in the tools that you might already have. And speaking of Microsoft, we noticed that the majority of your schools are Microsoft 365 based. So we're just wondering, in a world where you have Google and Microsoft and other, maybe not other players, is this a strategic direction of yours, or is just happenstance?
It's very much strategic. So obviously, I wouldn't want to criticize Google. Google have their business model around getting people in, but if that works, giving free tools for schools, then that works in many contexts. Mm-hmm. But obviously, there are questions around how they use the data. But we made a very strategic decision to go the Microsoft route, and that relates partly to the previous question around their cybersecurity. So doing everything, building everything within the Microsoft ecosystem. Obviously, we have the resources to be able to do this as well. But even smaller schools, individual schools, an individual IT manager working in a school, if they went the Microsoft route, or if they went the Google route, there's tools, cybersecurity tools within there to be able to ensure that you have a safe and secure ecosystem. Nothing's foolproof, of course, but that's why we went down the Microsoft route, because they offer very strong cybersecurity and they offer this standardization approaches. It's one source of truth for all of our data, and also in terms of the tech that we're building in-house as well, it gives us that platform, that infrastructure platform to be able to build out in a secure and scalable way.
Fantastic. Well, what can I say? Thank you so much. You shared so much with us of your knowledge, or your best practice, your experience. We can only thank you. I hope this is very useful to many schools who are struggling with data issues, technology issues, and cybersecurity issues as well.
A pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Chris.